Hi all, for our notable game today, let's have a look at another amazing encounter between Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov, this time at the start of the 1985 match. So if you remember, in their first match, which was aborted after 48 games, it was aborted due to the FIDE president, Florentino Campomanes, stating that it exhausted everyone connected with the match. So this new match started in September the 3rd, 1985. This is game 1. So the score is set again at 0-0. Karpov, in preparation for this match, had undergone a rigorous exercise program, including tennis and swimming. Kasparov had prepared by playing chess. Basically, he played a match against Hubner in Hamburg in May, another match against Alf Anderson in May, and then he also had some team play. And he said before the match, I had become stronger and had more stamina. My store of opening ideas has been thoroughly replenished. So let's see what Kasparov offered now in this new match, reset at 0-0, September the 3rd, 1985. Kasparov kicked off with d4. Karpov replied with knight f6. After c4 we have e6, knight c3, and now we have a Nimzo-Indian defense, named after Aaron Nimzovich, one of the greatest hypermoderns in chess, indicating that the center doesn't need to be literally occupied, it can be controlled with piece play, piece pressure. So bishop b4. We have now quite an unusual move played by Kasparov, usually e3, that's a very popular Rubinstein variation, or queen c2, but we have the third most popular, knight f3. So encouraging black, gives the option of bishop takes c3, but black rarely plays bishop takes c3 here. Usually black plays d5 in this position, according to Lightbook. Anatoly Karpov played another popular move here, which is c5. And the usual follow-up for white in this position is g3 to quickly fianchetto the bishop, to exert pressure on this diagonal. We have now knight e4. This is a sharp move, putting pressure on c3 immediately. White now, usually in this position, plays what seemingly, it looks a little bit strange to play queen d3, but that is a counter-attacking move, not just defensive, on c3, hitting that knight on e4. If Kasparov had reacted with bishop d2, then black could play like this, for example, and the position is roughly equal, but queen d3 is the more energetic continuation here, hitting that knight, challenging the knight on e4. Karpov puts even more pressure now on c3, ignoring the threat to his knight by countering on c3 here. This is theoretical, heavily trodden, 143 games in Lightbook in this position, and white usually plays queen takes e4 here. There's only 2 games with bishop d2, even though that's just supposed to be equal. Queen takes e4, bishop takes c3, and the idea here is not to take that, or just lose the rook on a1. Just to quickly show you, there's no compensation here. After queen takes c3, check, black can safely take on a1. The queen's not getting trapped or anything. So the usual move is after bishop takes c3, bishop d2. Now we have bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, and interestingly, Karpov indulged in the start of a series of rather strange queen maneuvers. I think he hadn't been prepared for this opening, and maybe was slightly on the improvising side of things. Around the opening, he'd spent like 30 minutes on one move around this point in the opening, or slightly earlier. So I think this betrays a slight improvisation here. The usual move in this position is knight c6 or castling. Now knight c6 would seem rather provocative, maybe a little bit counterintuitive. Just to give an example, knight c6, because it seems to be encouraging d5. If d5, though black is okay here after knight d4, that should be okay. There's games here with knight b3 even. This is using the pin here and the pin here. This position is interesting. It's been played before. There's games with queen takes or knight takes here. So knight c6 is actually quite an aggressive try from black. But Karpov's move is the start of a series of queen maneuvers. Queen b6. Is there a downside to putting pressure on b2 here? Well, if we look at black's pawn structure, there are some dark square weaknesses. Black is not having a good time, it seems, on the dark squares here with the dark square bishop leaving the scene. Also, this bishop is hemmed in. It can't really fianchetto anytime soon. Its route later will take some time. So what to do about the c8 bishop? That's a problem in black's position. As well as the dark squares, they're slightly weakened. And Kasparov here, instead of protecting b2, well, also it's a kind of double attack on d4. He solves the problem here by playing d takes c5. And this pawn is marking out that d6 square, which could be useful in the future. Although white has saddled himself with double pawns here. After queen takes b2, Kasparov just casually plays rook b1. And he's getting piece pressure on b7. And there's different ways to play the queen here, which are all pretty interesting. Karpov chose queen c3. Now he hasn't moved many pieces. It's like provocative. White has the rook and knight out, and the queen beautifully centralized here. And the bishop's ready to fianchetto. And the queen, okay, it might be delaying white a bit to castle because it's pinning that knight. But this is an intriguing opening decision. It looks like a product of potentially bad improvisation by World Championship standards. If queen takes a2, then white seems to have a strong centralizing move here in the form of queen d4, looking at g7, and say black castled. Then, intriguingly, queen c3 almost creates a net around the queen here. And if queen a4, as though the queen's going to escape, then bishop g2, stopping the queen's escape. And this starts to get really uncomfortable for black. Say knight c6, which provides a response queen b4 if rook a1. This position with the knight heading for d6 is uncomfortable for black. If black is forced to play now queen a5, this is quite nice for white. Maybe white can just snap off and play knight d6. And if you look at this kind of position, the bishop's still bad. The knight's in an ideal spot on that beautiful dark square. White's pieces are having a great time in this position. There's great pressure here, even though the queens are off the board. So yeah, queen takes a2 isn't ideal because of this amazing idea, queen d4. And also, if we look at queen a3 as another route, hitting the pawn, that can be protected and counterattack on here. If black castles bishop g2, this position, white has rook b5 getting out of the pin, unpinning, and black is again uncomfortable. If black plays knight c6 countering the queen, rook takes. This position is another scenario with rook a3 stopping b6 because of the pin on the a7 pawn. This is another uncomfortable scenario which could result. So in the game we have Karpov seemingly outrageously moving his queen multiple times without any piece development. And Kasparov uses the opportunity to try and heal this pawn structure a bit. He plays queen d3. He'd welcome an exchange of queens. And if the queen went back, then there's a tempo gain, knight e4 to go into d6. That would be intolerable. Black would lose castling rights. So this really kind of heals the pawn structure here. Queen a5 you might think is annoying, but again, white has resources like rook b5 in this position if needed to kick the queen. So actually Karpov took the queen, but he's faced with positional pressure. His position looks very dangerous indeed to solve these problems. The d6, the hemmed-in bishop. White has enormous pressure and coordination, natural coordination on the b file. We have an awkward-looking move here, knight a6. We have d4, but some people have argued knight c6 in this position might be better, but it's still a difficult position. That d6 is not going anywhere. White can clamp down with a knight perhaps going to d6. So knight a6 looks awkward. d4 protecting the pawn. Rook b8. We have bishop g2. And the king goes to e7. So it looks as though, well, what if black did manage to try and unravel with b6 or d6 at some point to try and break the binds on the position? The knight is supporting the rook on b8. Maybe this is an ingenious unraveling attempt. So Kasparov can't rest on his laurels here. He has to keep the pressure on the b file. And he does so with also keeping his king in the centre. A beautiful move, king e2. The king might be useful to come to d3 later in this particular position. There's no fear for the king in sight at the moment. We have rook d8, as though d6 might be on the cards to try and unravel, but knight e4 keeps the bind, like eyeing that d6, stopping black playing d6. So black tries b6. Karpov is trying to release the binds on his position, but now we see knight d6. Perhaps black should accept an inferior endgame here by playing b takes c5. This looks terrible, but it does justify kind of the knight being on a6. If, for example, b takes c5, takes d takes c5, this position, it would seem as though white's really comfortable here after this. If g5, then that can give white a biting opportunity on the h file. And if g5 isn't played, white's simply perhaps just going to build up here on the b file, perhaps. So what is black actually doing, in fact, in this position? He's starved of decent moves. That bishop could be a terrible bishop anytime knight c6. If we take this example continuation, say taking here, you can see that the knight kind of dominates the bishop in this structure. And the king can even come up the board. It's very unpleasant. But some people have argued that maybe, b takes c5 is better than the game continuation. But it's a very difficult position, either way. Knight c7 was played. And Kasparov prepares to double rooks. Rook b4, preparing to double rooks, to simply just maybe at some point take on c8 and take on b6. Well, if he takes on, this is going to be big trouble, just doubling rooks simply on b6. Black tries to simplify knight e8. And here, Kasparov gives up his delicious looking knight. Knight takes e8. King takes e8, just to keep the pressure on the b file, that enormous pin on the b6 pawn here. Bishop a6, and here counter-attacking c4, we have king e3 being played in this position. This looks intriguing, as though, how is this even possible, this move? Is this some amazing resource here? Let's just check this. What about rook a4, you might be asking? Rook a4, doesn't this work? Well, actually, maybe black can shift his attention to the unprotected piece here and just about survive now with this tempo gain. It looks as though black might be surviving. So white has to play accurately here. He just plays king e3, keeping that strong pin on the b file. Now black is also faced here with d5. If white gets in d5 and then follows up with c6, this is going to be extremely dangerous with ideas like c7. So black plays d5, and it undoubles, of course, white's pawns. C takes d6, but you might think, hold on, there's no pressure on b6 now. The thing is, if rook takes d6, that runs into c5 here. So Karpov plays rook bc8, so he wants to play rook takes d6 or even rook takes c4. Has Kasparov blown it here? Fascinatingly, there's an incisive move in this position which Kasparov had overlooked. Only later he had found in post-mortem analysis. Can you spot, well, Kasparov played a natural looking move here. King d3. His idea is still rook a4 and maybe put pressure on the a file. But there's actually a an amazingly clinical move in this position that exists. Can you spot it? If I give you 5 seconds, you might want to pause the video and go and analyze it. It's very, very difficult to actually find this mini combination, I would suggest. So you might spend a long time, but this is, if you want some training, here's the time. I'll give you 5 seconds starting from now to pause the video. What's an incisive move that white can play here? Okay, rook a4. It turns out this works quite beautifully, because if bishop takes c4, not rook takes a7, but in fact this bishop is potentially a loose piece. We have bishop b7 here, and you might think, isn't this countered with b5 protecting and attacking the bishop? White has a crushing move in this variation. Can you see from here, if I give you 5 seconds? Okay, d7, yes, it's all running with tempo. So it's winning material. So if king takes, this is just winning the exchange. So this would have ended this game, really. This is very little compensation for black, just the exchange down. But okay, Kasparov played another good move, king d3. He's still got the pressure. Black takes his pawn back, and that runs into rook a4. So the problems are not over. They've just gone into a different kind of problem now with the a file, the a7 pawn. Black has solved the d6 problem, but okay, he's going to be a pawn down here. And the only way, in fact, can't step back there. The bishop's eyeing b7. The only way to defend is b5. So that gives c takes, and now this pin, rook b8. So resourcefully using the pin, that's the way of defending the bishop for a moment. Rook a b4 actually threatening to take it now. Bishop drops back now, safety protected by b8. So ingenious, but still, at the end of the day, black is a pawn down now. Can Kasparov convert this? Bishop takes, rook takes, a4, solid pawn up. So 2-1 pawn majority. King e7. We have h4 as if maybe g5 was a concern with g4. So white is clamping down on the king side a bit. h6, f3, rook d5. Now white plays rook c1 as though rook c5. If he can get rook c5 and then rook c4, he's going to infiltrate on the 7th rank. Black parries with rook bd7, stopping rook c5, for example. Keeping the pressure on d4, and maybe e5 is coming up. Kasparov is not worried about e5. He plays a5. He's going to queen his pawn if black tries to play e5 in this position. Probably there's different ways of countering that here. e5 actually wasn't played here, even though black has doubled the rooks. Let's just quickly check this. If e5 is played in this position, now probably safest is rook c4. This is okay, and you see the advantage of the king in the sense of helping handling these issues, and white's still going to be pressing through soon. Maybe king e4 first instead of b6. So say, what does black actually do here? This position, maybe f4 to challenge that, to relieve that pressure, and b6. So yeah, this e5 is not such a big deal here. So Karpov actually played g5. He's ignored his e5 option. We have hg, not hg, rook takes g5, hitting the g3 pawn, so attention away from d4. We have g4. White has still got this b6 on the cards to try and use his 2-1 pawn majority. h5, and now b6 is used. A takes, black tries to block. And now this issue is handled with rook c5, hitting the rook with tempo. It's a loose piece. f5, and here any check, black can just take in king d7. It's not a problem. White takes on h5 here. Rook takes h5, and now a brilliant move which spells disaster for black. Can you see on move 40 the move Kasparov plays? So if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video here, what would you play in this position? Okay, king c4, king walk. Go to a6. How does black stop that? Rook h8, king b5, and there's also king c6 as well. Try and lift the blockade. Black stops king a6, but black is overloaded here now. Rook bc4, threatening rook c7 check. And black is really just defenseless in this position. He resigned here. Let's just prove this a little bit, this final position. If black can try and rescue the situation with king d6, king d7, is there any tricks? Check would seem the most incisive. Check. This position, b7. And if here, king b6. The king is so aggressive now. And rook c8 is on the cards. It's helpless for black. So yeah, that final position with the king coming up, herding the passed pawn, is absolutely, it seems indefensible. So yeah, after rook bc4, on move 42, the answer to life, the universe, and everything, according to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah, Karpov resigned this game. So a fantastic start from Kasparov, having great difficulty in the first match of beating Karpov at all. You know, starting with 5-0 in the previous match. Now in this new match, already Kasparov is in the lead with 1-0 in the very first game. What a fantastic start for Garry Kasparov. September 1985, September the 3rd, 1985, the match played in Moscow, World Championship match. Okay, I hope you got some instructive points out of this game. It seems there was an element of improvisation and surprise on Karpov's part, because the queen manoeuvres seem to leave black, after the queen's got exchanged, with certain positional difficulties. The bind on d6, the bad bishop, the b-file pressure, and these resulted in black basically eventually having to give away a pawn to solve some of the problems. And then with the king in the centre, it crawled up to support that extra pawn. So the logic of it is extremely beautiful for white's play here. Systematic exploitation of advantages, basically accumulating advantages until it became impossible to defend that passed b pawn. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.